Natividad. My mom taught me that before going to bed and after waking up in the morning, I should wash my face. I comb my hair every day so it always looks good. And I make sure my clothes are clean before I go to bed. Good night.
But it is right to show kindness.
This is INCRadio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesianicristo.
And good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of INC Radio Florida. I'm one of your hosts, Brother Robert Topalas, and here today on INC Radio, we're going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to every Floridian's heart, and that's how it is that you're going to keep your plants sustainable, much less alive, during these hot summer months that we've got here. So we're going to be diving deep into everything about gardening here in the Sunshine State, and we are very fortunate that we've got Farmer Jim on our team here this morning who's going to be helping us, walking us through some expert tips and tricks and strategies on how it is we're going to be able to defeat all of that sweltering heat here in Florida. Of course, today is Saturday, July 20th. It's 9:30 in the morning, a little bit after 9:30 in the morning here on the East Coast of the United States. And how are things up there, Brother Jim?
Things are doing well. Good morning. I tell you, it's one of those perfect days where in the summer, we're finally starting to get a little bit of rain. And that is such a relief. And let me tell you, it has been a scorcher. It's been a scorcher here in the Panhandle of Florida. It's been a scorcher across the country and honestly across the world. You just hear a lot about the heat, and we're going to really get into telling you all how I beat the heat. But let me first say good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Buenos dias, buenas noches, guten morgen. Maganda Gabe. Thank you all so much for joining us. I really hope that I can help you with gardening in the heat of the summer, because I know, tell me, that it can get really frustrating this time of the year, simply with the lack of water. And, you know, every cloud seems like a blessing because you know that just like you feel like you need some relief, you know, probably that tomato plant, it needs some relief as well.
Absolutely. And I think that here, you know, people really don't understand. A lot of people who don't live in Florida don't understand. They seem to think that, oh, well, Florida, you know, it's hot, it's humid, plants are going to love it, they're going to thrive. And, you know, there are a lot of things you need to be careful of. And you know, I can kill a plant in the winter. I'm all four seasons. It doesn't matter, you know, but fortunately, we've got you, Brother Jim, who's going to help us. So let's go ahead and dive into your talk today on how it is you're going to help us to be able to save our plants from all of the sweltering heat.
Yeah, and I will share with everybody, you know, I was on vacation for about a week. So coming back in preparation of the show, you know, I put together these slides and, you know, like in a good way and in a bad way, I've got all these great examples because when you're away from the garden for a week, you know, things can happen, right? Thankfully, there was some rain while I was away. But certainly, you know, the bugs and the battling really kind of took off. So we'll jump to that first slide. And of course, you know, anybody that has a garden knows, you know, the importance of watering. And, you know, we get a lot of rain in Florida right off the bat. You know, one of the things to really make sure of is that when we get a rain shower, and it can come down hard and fast here in Florida, but your plants really need about an inch to an inch and a half in this heat of water. And if they don't get it, they're obviously they're really going to suffer. But sometimes when we get these short rain showers in Florida, it's a bit deceiving. It seems like, oh wow, that's rain. I won't have to water the garden. But the first thing you really want to do is to go out and put your hand down in the soil, and you'll want to go down a couple inches and reach up and just see what the soil, if it feels dry, because sometimes those showers will make the top of the soil look, perfectly damp. But really, you got to dig down deep and look to see, because those roots the plants send down, they're the ones that not only are they bringing up the moisture, but they're also bringing up the nutrients. The one thing with watering, if you've seen, people just going out every day and watering, uh, the number one key is water deeply, not frequently. So, because the more frequently you water, the more you're training your roots to be shallow. And shallow roots are roots that just aren't as protected. They're gonna dry out faster. That soil is going to dry out, obviously, from the top down to the bottom. So you really want to train your plants to send those roots as deeply as possible. And how you do that is by just taking your time. When you go out to water for a while. But I try to water about every 2 or 3 days, depending on whether we get any rain. But like I said, watching the soil, testing it with your hands to see if it's really getting wet or not. That's the important thing. Now, people ask about watering. The internet is so full of information now. It's kind of funny, but there is no like bad time to water per se. Um, there's a lot of people that warn against watering during the middle of the day and things like that. Um, but I mean, what happens if you water during the middle of the day? The downside is likely a lot of that water will evaporate. It's really just kind of wasting time. But at if you do it early in the morning, it's probably the best time to water. And like I said, when you water, you're watering deep. You can do it late in the evening. But one of the things you want to watch out for anytime you get your plants wet, the leaves wet, um, you run the risk of growing fungus and mold and things like that. It would be very detrimental to plant. So that's why most of them recommend watering in the morning. I tend to water in the evening just because it works out better on my schedule. And I kind of feel good about knowing that water kind of has a chance to really get absorbed. But the thing I do is I don't water my leaves. I've got one of those wand waterers, and I stick it down close to the soil. And one of the important places to water is right around what's called the drip line, right? So if you have a larger plant like an okra plant and you have these large leaves, the feeder roots are actually up to the edge of the leaves. And those are those tiny hair-like roots, but those are the ones that are really getting the most nutrients. So it's okay to water around the base of a plant, but make sure if it's a big plant that you're really hitting it on what's called the drip line.
So, Brother Jim, because we love Florida and we know that Florida is such a finicky state, especially in the summertime. So, for those that don't know, if you want to get your beach day in, don't go in the afternoon for many reasons. One, because it's too hot, but in the summer, it's because when it comes down pouring, even if it starts on a sunny, clear day at 8, 7 a.m. I guarantee you by 2 p.m. it's gonna start looking like gloom and doom outside. So with that being said, how do you know how much to water if the weather is gonna be finicky like that? If like here in Tampa, we flood pretty bad in South Tampa. So, I mean, the ground is very, very wet. I don't know how it is there in Pensacola, but I would think probably here in Tampa, the best time to water would be in the morning. But then if you're expecting those afternoon thunderstorms, how do you gauge that?
Yeah, And that's a great question. I think a lot of people get concerned about overwatering. I grew up in Ohio. They had very loamy soil, which means it was almost like sponge-like. Like it would really absorb moisture, and it could get really muddy. The thing about Florida is, for the most part, even though I use a whole lot, I try to build a loamy soil, but it's always kind of a battle because our soil is just naturally so sandy. And the thing about sandy soil is it just does not hold the moisture. It's going to, uh, as much as it can rain, and like to your point, it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't water too much because it's going to rain in the afternoon. Yeah, my recommendation is go ahead and water like you would plan to water, regardless, because ultimately a lot of that moisture is going to kind of run out. And because so many people like I do in Florida use raised beds. Raised beds are even more likely to kind of lose some of that moisture a little faster just because you have a lot more surface area on the side
Mm,
dry out. But go ahead. It's getting hard in Florida, in my opinion, to really overwater, right? I mean,
yes.
the one thing in all these slides, it just I'll I can't help but repeat. Growing up on a farm, my dad, he really kind of instilled in me that one of the best things somebody who's growing something, and taking care of something. I mean, you think about it. This is going to be the same thing with a kid. You check on them regularly, right? I can't expect my 5-year-old, to be off in a room somewhere and not destroying something at some point. It's probably going to happen. So, that's the same thing with plants and gardens and animals. You want to look at it, and with like I said, with the soil, you want to put your hand down in the soil. Don't trust your rain gauges. Don't trust, whatever the readout is. Everything is local. You could get a half inch more rain than your neighbor. You just never know. So put your hand down in that soil, look at it, and make sure that it is truly moist. And that's, like I said, a couple inches down. Uh, and kind of along the same lines, watering is important. And then, like on the next slide, I really want to talk about fertilizing. Now, fertilizing, obviously, a lot of people fertilize at the beginning when they're planting things and stuff like that. But to really keep plants healthy, and especially plants that have uh, that can produce for quite a while. This is a picture of a little okra plant, that I had. But tomatoes, cucumbers, really anything that produces a lot of fruit, um, it's going to be beneficial to, even after that plant's a little more mature, to go ahead and put the fertilizer in. And the method I like to use is called furrow feeding, and that's kind of going back to what I mentioned about the drip line. Is you kind of make a circle around the plant where those leaves are dropping off. You want to go a couple inches down, and you want to fertilize based on what the packaging says. This is another very important thing. A lot of people over fertilize, and that's not going to help the plant. Matter of fact, it's a good chance it might kill the plant. Also, I have fertilized right after watering because it's really important, especially in the summer, to fertilize after a big rain when your soil is moist. You really don't want to fertilize when you're going through a really hot, dry spell. When you fertilize, when you first introduce those nutrients, it can shock the plant. So you want to make sure that plant's already in a pretty good shape. That's why, stitching time saves nine, the old expression, because you should start fertilizing before your plant looks like it's about to die, because chances are it's going to be too late, if you start doing it afterwards. Um,
So is there no chance if my plant does die, because I guarantee I might forget about it because it's not going to cry at me.
once again, you just have to kind of keep your eye on things. And in all these later slides, I'll explain. It's kind of, sometimes it's just time to surrender. There's a lot of times I've tried to help a plant limp along, and it's almost cruel. It's like torture. I feel like, that poor plant, just like, please let me surrender. Um, but
Well, don't worry, Sister Audrey, because you're going to have something that's going to cry for you in about a month
Oh, I
consistently.
know.
That is the kids will let you know. but
Plants, maybe not, but yeah.
but it's like I said, if you're looking at your plant, if the plant's leaves are looking yellow, you probably want to put a fertilizer that has a little bit more nitrogen in it. And I use natural fertilizers, and I mostly use natural fertilizers for that little square picture down below. I don't know if you can see, but there's about 8 worms in that picture. It's like, where's Waldo if you try to find them all? But that's a sign of good rich soil. And putting a lot of commercial fertilizers in a soil, that may cause a bit of an unbalance in your soil. And that's one of the big reasons why I use organic fertilizers. They tend to have a little bit better balance, but it's all just chemistry. And like I said, if your plants are looking yellow, you probably need a little bit of nitrogen in your soil. You may, there's phosphates, there's other things, but looking at your plant uh, and watching your plant, the leaves should be a deep green, and that's going to tell you it's healthy. The minute you start seeing those plants look like they're suffering a little bit, where their leaves aren't quite as deep green, that's the time to water. So you go to the next slide. Um, succession planting, and I I gave a presentation earlier in the year, and I was talking about always be planting, and that's one of my favorite lines to say about for anybody. Always be planting. You just never know what the weather's going to be like. I came back and we had a week of really hot, dry weather. But towards the end of the week, we started getting a lot of rain, and I was really glad. You can see this picture. I took out some plants that had kind of went through the process, and I had some open space. I put these cucumber seeds in, and within 3 days, this is what the cucumber seeds look like. So they take off. The great thing about hot weather, because there are some great things about hot weather, and that is the heat-loving plants really will germinate fast, and they'll really grow fast. And so if you're always planting, we have a very long growing season here in Florida, and there's been plenty of time that I've planted things in August and September, and I still had harvest because as the soil warms, things are going to grow a little faster, and plus, you have a little bit more humidity in the air. That's going to help, more like a greenhouse effect, right? Um, but heat-loving germinators, I made a little list for everybody. It's like cucumbers are great. They're going to produce, bitter melon. You can put them out. They're going to produce. A lot of the vine plants, especially the beans. I get that picture down in the bottom are beans that are they're going crazy. They love the heat. Um, Okra, okra. I do a lot of succession planting with okra, just because I got to have okra in all my different soups, right? I mean, I love to eat it. A lot of the squash plants will do really well too. You can put them in the ground. They're going to germinate fast, and they're probably going to produce, a lot faster than even what the package says. The
So,
important,
Brother Jim, for if you're looking to kind of look ahead and anticipate like the fall harvest, is this the time when you start planting for those?
yeah, that's a great question. If I'm saying always be planting, I'm always kind of planning to plant as well. And one of the things you look at is on all packages, or I order most of my seeds online. And when you order seeds, you want to look at that germination temperature. I love leafy greens, but really they are a fall plant. It's really hard to get them to germinate because they tend to like soil temperatures in the 60s or even below. So you want to look at that germination temperature. You're really kind of wasting money if you put seeds in the ground that your soil, and like for me, my soil is really not going to cool off until around the beginning of September, and even then it might be a little warm. you
Mm.
know One of the ways I kind of get around that is, my okra is standing there. It's just creating a kind of a canopy. You can imagine like a mini jungle, right? So there's this canopy, so I can plant underneath it. Obviously plants need sunlight, but with this Florida sunlight, they don't need a lot because the more they get, the more they'll tend to dry out. But I go ahead and I start buying my seeds for the fall. I'm probably going to do that in the next week or two. And like I said, kale's a great way to start. It's such a hardy plant that even in the heat, it's going to continue to grow. A little bit when it cools off a little bit more, I'm going to get into the bok choy, and
Ooh, yes.
yeah, bok choy is just heavenly. Um, and then the lettuce as it gets even cooler. I can tend to get lettuce before the end of the season, have some standing. It just seems like every year winter starts a little bit later, and being in the Panhandle, we do get some chillier weather, but we might get that cold snap. But I always put covers on and things like that. But the summertime, it's a great time to just test things out. And instead of thinking about planting things in long rows or stuff like that, in a backyard garden, I'm not a commercial grower, and I'm not on the farm anymore. I grew up on a farm, but I just have a regular backyard, and a lot of
Oh,
times.
you do not have a regular backyard, Brother Jim. I've seen regular backyards. If any of our audience has ever had the pleasure of being on a show where he shows us his backyard, it is far from regular.
You can take the boy off the farm, but you can't take the farm out of the boy, right? So I'm still going to be growing stuff always. I go to the next slide. The you know this is something I learned a long time ago, especially when you get into the heat of the season, is pick early and pick often. Everybody has, if you haven't grown vegetables for yourself, you have this perception of what things look like, but you have to appreciate what you see in the store. A lot of those vegetables, they may have been picked a week or 2 weeks ago. They're definitely not fresh anymore. And they look a little bit different. They might have a different consistency. So it's okay to go ahead and pick your tomatoes when they just start to blush a little bit. If you pick your tomatoes after they turn a deep red, it's really putting stress on the plant. And you want that tomato plant to be, constantly producing throughout the whole season. All plants have a cycle. Their cycle is to try to grow as big as they can and then to make babies. And tomatoes are those babies. And if they can put out a lot of babies, they think they're done and they're not going to make any more. So what you want to do if you pick things a little bit earlier, this is especially true for beans. I was a little sad when I came back from vacation. I'd been gone for a week, and some of my long beans, they thought they were done. And I said, hey, you guys didn't look at the schedule. I wanted some more long beans. So, but they had produced some. There were a few pods on there that had already dried out. And that sends a signal to the plant that your life cycle is complete. You've produced your seeds for the next season, so you can go ahead and die, right? So picking is not only beneficial to you because you get more to eat, but it's actually going to help that plant to be a lot more productive. Okra is another great example. I've seen people show me the okra that's 2 foot long, and I thought, well, you really can't eat it. Same thing with zucchini. Even though I'm pretty good at taking that giant zucchini and making some decent bread out of it, but you don't want those plants being too big. I've got a picture of my blackberries. It's one of my favorite perennials that I have in the garden, and it has done so well this year. But it's hard to tell, but there's a couple of them that in the back that the birds found them. So another reason you want to pick early is everybody gets hungry just like you do. So the birds get hungry, the bugs get hungry, and when they see that perfectly ripe tomato or that blackberry that's bursting with flavor. Oh yeah,
Oh, you gotta beat them to it.
oh, I got a big blue jay that just loves my blackberry. And he's coming down and he's going to have a feast. And so I got to pick them right when they're getting ripe. I need to go ahead and pick them. Otherwise, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to have one fat blue jay sitting on my fence. but even things like that's a smaller eggplant there. When I came back from vacation, we ended up eating eggplant every day for that entire week for a different way because there were these giant eggplants and a lot of times even when things are a little bit on the not ripe side, um, they actually have better flavor and they tend to really work well in cooking as well. They tend to absorb a little bit more. So, and they don't get as mushy, right? So it's all about texture as well. We go to the next slide. Um, Sometimes you just got to surrender. You put your hands up and it's okay. I lose, like I said, coming back from vacation, I had a lot of issues. I tend not to use pesticides, but, you do what you can. And, if you see something and it kind of can be a little heartbreaking, one of the biggest mistakes you can make, this kind of plays along plan early, plan often, is trying to keep something alive that's just not producing. Everything in the garden is there for consumption, right? That's why I grow it. So if it's not producing or if it doesn't look like it's very healthy, I'm going to go ahead and tear it out. This picture down in the corner is chives. I came back and they had just really dried out. So I went in and I just pulled out everything that was dead because that's another thing too. You can prune a lot of plants, especially herbs. If you prune them back and you remove all that dead, there's a good chance they're going to come back. And my chives have come back. My mint came back. A lot of the things that were in pots that just didn't get the water that they needed while I was gone. Up there in the corner, there's a picture of an assassin bug, and I hate it because it had a picture of all the see those all those leaves have been chewed on. That's a tobacco worm. But that assassin bug had a tobacco worm in its jaws, and I just wanted to give him a medal. I was so proud of him. But that's another thing. If anytime you use a lot of pesticides, you're going to start losing a little bit of that natural balance. And I have plenty of predators in my garden that are out there, like this assassin bug, that's helping me keep the pests down. That sad-looking tomato, and yes, that is tomato. It's important to look at things on the backside of that tomato. It looked fine, but observing and making sure that you're pulling stuff out that needs to be pulled off. If it looks like it's a little damaged, it's not going to heal itself. It's only going to get worse. So just go ahead and pull it off and throw it away because that plant's energy is going to go to the vegetables that are still healthy, that are still coming on. And like I said, you want everything to be productive, but that's okay. And once again, I will end it on the most important part, and that's just vigilance. You have to look at your garden. You can't plant it and forget it. You have to check to make sure the soil's not dried out. You have to check to make sure that everything's looking green and healthy. And you do that by going out there every day. And frankly, I really enjoy having my morning coffee, walking out on the back porch and just kind of looking at, the garden.
I can picture Brother Jim walking out into his back porch with his coveralls on and his big cup of coffee, overseeing the vastness of his kingdom, back there.
The sun just peeking over
exactly.
the horizon.
You're getting the same vibe, Sister Audrey, and then and then all of a sudden he sees that there's a tobacco worm, so he unleashes his assassin bugs, and they go forth into battle. I mean, it's you, Brother Jim. You're the only person that I know personally that can make gardening sound this exciting.
Yes.
Honestly, it's fascinating, and we of course are so grateful that we're able to benefit from all of these tips and these tricks because everyone knows I need all the help I can get. But with these tips, I'm hoping that all of you that are out there, especially if you live here in Florida, that you are now going to be motivated, encouraged, and not be afraid to grow these plants and go out and start your gardens. Start small, as Brother Jim says. Plant often. Plant. What's your favorite saying? Always
be planting.
always be planting, right? Okay. That's we're going to put that on a t-shirt for the next show. But as always happens, we of course are at the bottom of the hour, or at the top of the hour for us here on INC Radio Florida. It's 10 a.m. here on the East Coast, which means that coming up next is going to be INC Radio South Central States. So please stay tuned for them. But of course, we want to thank everyone that tuned in today. And we also want to extend a special greeting and thank you to those who help our show to be on every week. And that starts, of course, with our executive minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, Brother Angelo Aranya Manalo, also, who's our Subsea CEO and CFO coordinator, and Brother Manly Indaya, our executive producer. We thank you all for, of course, supporting our program, helping to keep us on air. And of course, to Kuya Tech, who's out there, who definitely plays a big part in making sure that we are online and looking good every week. We thank you so much, Kuya Tech, for being with us this morning. And we thank you, our audience. Please join us next week for another episode of INC Radio Florida. But this is Brother Robert DePaulis in Tampa, for Brother Jim there in Pensacola, and for Brother or Sister Audrey here in Tampa as well. We'll see you next week. Have a great Saturday.